Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Utah Film Pod. My name is Josh Terry. I will be your host alongside Danny Hatch and Mark LaRocco. The whole team together, our combined forces, kind of like the Avengers, but not really.
The three amigos, maybe?
There we go. That's probably a little more accurate.
A little more
I think
realistic.
That would be better. Yeah.
We have no superpowers.
Right. Who was
or
I
at
talking
least we
to?
can't reveal that.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been my buddy Brian. And both of us acknowledged that I think we've only seen Three Amigos like once. Because it seems to be one of those movies that I think, well, I can't remember if I've mentioned this before, but growing up in Utah, I think that there is a core group of movies, especially if you kind of grew up, in the 80s, 90s, that you are almost obligated to know and have seen and embrace, because I always
and recite
exactly.
Yeah,
like Princess Bride was one of those ones, which was hard for me because I saw it late enough that I didn't really get into it. I'm pretty sure we talked about this. And then like Holy Grail and Three Amigos was another one where it's like I know that Three Amigos got a lot of traction in my demographic, even though I guess I've only seen it the one time. Although I love Steve Martin is incredible.
Yeah, he is.
Maybe so. This is like totally. Related and unrelated. If you have not had the chance to go back and listen to his original stand-up, it's incredible. It is absolutely fascinating because he is doing such unique styling and material that even though it's like, because I think these are recordings from back in the 1970s, kind of before he started hosting Saturday Night Live and before he started getting into a lot of movies. But yeah, just incredible stuff. If you're a Steve Martin fan, you have to go listen to his stand-up.
I love his stand-up. In fact, he wrote one of my favorite autobiographies I've ever read or listened to, and it's called Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. And
it is.
He tells a lot of his jokes, too. It's funny because it actually is pretty meaningful, and he talks about his complicated relationship with his dad. I did it. He talks about how he had this line when his dad was dying, basically on his deathbed, where he believes I did it for you, like he did his career for his dad. But the real truth is, he says, I did it because of you. And but he has so many good jokes in his stand-up, and his stand-up became insane. I mean, it was like huge stadiums that could barely see him. But yeah, I'm going back to Three Amigos. That was sort of my introduction to Martin Short as a kid. I knew because of other material, I guess I knew Steve Martin and I really liked him, and I knew Chevy Chase, but I didn't really know Ned Niederlander. I think that was his name in the movie, and he was hilarious. And I've seen that a few times. I've seen it at least 3 or 4 times.
So my first Martin Short experience was Inner Space, and still one of my favorites.
Didn't that come out after?
Oh my goodness.
Or did you see Three Amigos
No,
late?
but that's what I mean, is that I only saw Three Amigos the one time, I believe, and it was several years down the road.
Okay.
And so kind of like with Princess Bride, I was familiar with the references because people would always kind of, kids at school would say stuff. But I didn't actually watch it until later. And Inner Space was my, Inner Space introduced me to Ford Mustangs, the music of Sam Cooke and Meg Ryan, and also Martin Short.
And Quaid, don't forget Quaid.
And Dennis Quaid. Oh yeah.
I mean, I like those kind of movies, like sci-fi comedy movies. That was a good one.
Well, it was a Joe Dante movie who also did Gremlins, and just a fun vibe. So look at that. All these fun 80s movies, right, Danny?
Oh boy, we always get it. We can't go a podcast without mentioning at least one 80s movie.
Well, it was a huge era. To be fair, it's more something I have against.
Oh, we don't need fairness on this podcast.
And the fashion was impeccable. I mean, we all agree on the 80s fashion, right?
Maybe that's where the Mustangs helped. Maybe that helped. So I guess it's kind of a sneak preview. We've got a couple of popular streaming series that are still, I think they both come out in the last month. Some long anticipated series we're going to be talking about. But the first thing we're going to address is a little more related to news because it's not quite old enough to be an 80s film, but it is old enough to be an old film, right? I mean, it's 13 years ago, 2009.
It is getting up there in age, yeah.
So Avatar, I assume accurately in anticipation of the sequel, which is coming out in was it December?
December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they re-released Avatar, and it took the box office again, just like it did in the old days. Does that mean that there's nothing out right now, or does that mean that Avatar is just that good? Because
I
I don't
There
get it.
is a lot out right now. Like, to be fair, like a lot of things have been coming out. I don't think there are as many like, I don't know, because there's a lot of like R kind of stuff, slasher kind of stuff, just because like
Right.
Halloween's coming out. So maybe this one's like a safer, family friendly thing. You've got the 3D thing going for it, like that was what was going for it back in the day too, right? So like I think people are wanting to experience that again. A lot of people who didn't experience it in 3D now want to see it in 3D. So
yeah.
it's kind of that nostalgia trip, kind of like a very unique experience. Even though I don't know if a re-release is necessarily unique, but it feels like an event. I
It
think.
Yeah.
does. Yeah, and it's a weird thing. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit. Like, it came out in 2009. It was a December release. It even was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. In
Oh
fact,
yeah.
interestingly, I remember this because it was a James Cameron movie, and
Yeah.
you should never doubt James Cameron.
I
He
guess
always
not.
comes through with these huge, ginormous blockbusters because nobody really knew what this movie would be. I mean, it could have been a complete failure, right? We just didn't know. It did really, really well. It became the number one movie of all time when you combine its worldwide gross,
Yeah,
like foreign
for
and
quite a
domestic.
stretch.
Yeah,
Yep.
Until
and so
until Endgame, right? I mean,
Yeah. Until
wasn't it
yes,
Endgame.
number one
yeah.
until
Well,
Endgame?
actually, I
Or
just looked on
Infinity
Box
War.
Office Mojo. It's still number one. So I don't know if that maybe counts the re-release, but it's number one worldwide. If you're just going domestic, number one is still Force Awakens, and Avatar is actually fourth.
I didn't realize Force
So
Awakens did
so
that well.
so Endgame did pass in Avatar in the U.S. Just like Star Wars did. But anyway, yeah, if you combine it, it's still up there. It's still number one. And I remember when I saw we did the whole like I think it was like $14 a ticket, 3D IMAX, like the full experience, and it kind of gave me a headache. Like I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I know it's a great technical achievement, and it's I appreciated it, but it was kind of like it felt long. It was kind of hard to watch, and I actually want to see it in just normal 2D. That's kind of what I
Well,
want to
because
see
Was that the only
before
time you'd
before
seen
the
it?
second one comes out. Yeah, that's the only way I've seen it is the 3D in the theater.
and
I
see,
Wow.
haven't seen it since.
I only saw it in 2D, and I've wondered if that's part of the reason that I completely don't understand the fascination with this movie. I have never I don't mean to just be kind of like the cynical negative critic, but
Hmm.
all the movies we've been talking about, Endgame and Force Awakens, and I know E.T. was huge for a long, long time, and Star Wars
Jurassic
and Jaws
Park.
and Jurassic
Yeah.
Park, all these absolutely,
Hmm.
completely make sense. Even if they're not my favorite movies, I get it. I don't understand why
Avatar.
people saw. I mean, because as an event, right? That makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a big deal. It's in 3D. It's IMAX. But to get the amount of money that it had to have made, you got to go back and see it more than once, right? I mean, this couldn't
Yeah.
just be
I
everybody.
think people did.
Why,
Here's my theory
Mark?
on it.
Why did they do this? Explain this to me.
Here's what I think.
Give me satisfaction and resolution on
I
Avatar
do
because I
think
just don't get it.
I do think the special effects are amazing because they did this motion capture technology where they had, for example, Zoe Saldana
Sure.
give this great performance as the lead female Navi. I don't even remember her name, but Navi is the race of blue, tall, kind of
I'm
slender
impressed that you remember
humanoid
that.
aliens. I just remember it because I've heard a bunch of other podcasters talk about Avatar as well. And I read about it, and also again, it was a huge Oscars. It was nominated for a ton, even though it didn't win very many. In fact, what I was going to mention is that James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow used to be married. They're exes, and
Okay.
Catherine Bigelow won the Best Director Oscar over James Cameron that
Oh,
year
was that
for The Hurt
the
Locker.
Hurt
Hurt
Locker that
Locker.
year? Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. And James Cameron had already won before, for Titanic, which was another huge blockbuster for a long time.
Oh,
But
right, right.
Hmm.
anyway, the special effects, the visual effects in it were pretty amazing. I mean, especially like going underwater and flying on those creatures in the air, and because what they did is they used the actors, kind of like they did with Gollum in Sir Andy Serkis in Lord of the Rings,
Uh-huh.
where he acts out everything, but then they enhance it with sort of the augmented special effects to make him look like Gollum, but he's really acting it out.
Hmm.
That's how they did Avatar. It wasn't just pure CG, so it's like Zoe Saldana with all the little like dots on her head and like this motion capture suit acting it out. And then they used a lot of her same, the same facial features basically, and they made the eyes bigger and the face longer. But I mean, it does look really cool. Like it's pretty amazing. But
So I do.
it's the
I'm.
story I've heard is a knockoff. I mean, people
Oh
have
yeah.
compared it to so
Of
many
Well, the,
other
the
everything. Yeah.
joke
things.
the joke is that it's dances with Smurfs.
Yeah,
I
dances.
remember
I've never
that.
heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was that one and not the Land Before Time. Was it Fern
Fern
Gully?
Gully. Yeah, it's
Ferngully.
Fern
Yeah,
Gully.
right.
Dances with
And
Wolves and Fern Gully are the main two that I've heard.
yeah,
But yeah.
and just no, like I do. Not that I'm giving you assignments here, but like I do. I would be really curious, Mark, to see what you thought seeing it in 2D because
I think I'm going to, because I plan to watch
everything.
the second one.
Yeah, because seeing it, I, all I can figure is that the 3D must have just been something really spectacular. Because watching it just in 2D, I didn't think the special effects were all that great. I just
Hmm.
kind of thought, well, this looks like really good animation. And I know I've
Yeah.
said that before, but this, kind of
And you
the,
thought that when it came out, or have you
yeah,
returned
yeah.
to it after the fact? Okay.
No, I never seen it a second time because I just never had any desire remotely. Like nothing about the characters, the story, the plot, none of it just seemed all that great.
What?
And don't get me wrong, I love lots of James Cameron stuff. I mean,
Where do you
Terminator
fall on
2 and
Titanic?
I never saw it.
Whoa.
How?
I've
Okay.
seen I've seen bits of pieces on on just on TV.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, I debated about going late just to watch the destruction scene. And I
Okay.
mean, I'll give that one credit. I mean, I don't turn my nose up at Titanic. So, like the way that I'm kind of like being. I mean, I saw Avatar and I didn't like it. Titanic I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see, and so it's like, hey, it might be great. I mean, I when I think about the things that people love about Titanic and why it became like that huge juggernaut, that makes more sense to me compared to Avatar. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's just because I saw Avatar and just wasn't that. It just didn't seem like there was any substance other than like the whole thing was just, oh, well, it's got these really crazy, cool special effects, and that's it. Like that's the only thing people ever talk about with that movie, and I didn't think they were that good.
Well, I like Titanic quite a
Are
bit.
you
I
hurt?
thought it was
Oh
great.
yeah, no, and that's fine. You
Yeah.
guys, no, I like I said. I mean, I don't criticize anybody who dislikes or who really loves Titanic because A, I didn't see it, and B,
Yeah.
I think that the things that I have heard about it, it seems more logical to me that it's kind of got this big sweeping epic story, and there's like this incredible sequence where the ship is destroyed, and
Yeah.
they got like the song that comes in at the end that
Yeah.
and so
It's
so
not like
that
my favorite movie, but like kind of what you're saying. Like I think in my mind it's like one of those examples of like classic movie,
yeah.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why
Well, and
it
it
kind of
checks multiple boxes, right?
yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah.
like I said, I honestly cannot think of a single thing people have ever praised about Avatar except for the special effects. I mean, was I
Well,
wrong? Was there a
can
Celine
I
Dion
play
song
a
at the end of
devil's
Avatar?
advocate? I'll play a devil's advocate for a second
Oh,
because like
please.
I was a preteen when this came out, so like I was around like 10 to 13 like during this whole era. And so like I didn't see it in theaters cuz I think it like around that time like my parents would like go and see things and then we'd watch on like Redbox and my dad would like fast forward all the things that like he's like, "Oh, this isn't great for kids," right? But I saw it multiple times. We would like have our projector set up in our living room and like watch it kind of like big screen and everything, and I thought it was like just beautiful. I loved the world. And then I'd get together with my friends and we'd all watch it because like everyone had a DVD of it. So I saw the movie like so many times and I really really liked it during that stage. I haven't seen it since, and I mean to be fair, the story was very new for me. I hadn't seen Fern Gully. I was too young to have seen Dances with Wolves. So like I felt very invested in that story of like I want the Navi to be protected. I want them to be able to fight back against, the humans, right? And so, I totally got swept up in it, and I can see the appeal if, you're not older and know all these other things. So, like, I can see why it blew up. And I am really interested to see what they do with the sequel because, like, just so many, video essays have come out that I've seen about this movie, specifically with the world building and like the website, the whole like encyclopedia that they came out with of just like every plant, every animal, having the entire language. And so like I am very interested to see what they do with the sequel since they already have all of the hard work put into it. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's gonna be interesting. Mark was talking about all the effects that they had with the first, which were pretty groundbreaking at the time. And the stuff that they're doing now, like they're doing a lot of those motion capture stuff, but like underwater, which is kind of new. So like it's very, very interesting, just production wise, the whole thing with this. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of it now, but like
It's
the
okay if you are.
circa 2010 definitely was a fan.
Yeah, no, and I mean, maybe to clarify, like I don't have any problem with it being a successful movie or being a
No,
popular
yeah.
movie. What I can't wrap my head around is how is this the number one movie of all time? Because when you're talking about the, just the immensity of the other movies we've been talking about, I'm sorry, it just doesn't measure up
Well,
at
I
all.
mean, Mark was saying that it was like $14 a ticket to have that experience, right? And now, like, people are going back to have, like, you have to pay extra for a 3D experience, right? So, like, I
That,
think it's
yeah.
So
because
we're
it was a
back
more
to
expensive
inflation.
ticket.
It's inflation again.
That could
Oh my
explain
gosh.
it partly. No. Maybe there were a lot of people who saw that in 3D and saw it on IMAX and just said, okay, well, this is the movie experience. I'm just gonna shell out some bucks for, and that could also explain it because I don't know like number of tickets sold if it's.
Exactly,
I mean, it's
exactly.
probably still really, really high, but I mean,
Hmm.
I remember when I went to it, and my wife and I both went on a date, and it was like the most expensive. It was the most I'd ever paid for a movie in the theater. I
And
guess
you've
not
been
counting
married a long time.
Sundance. Well, yeah. Well, actually, it was '09. We were probably dating. We got married in 2010. So we were
Okay,
probably
there you
engaged when I
go.
saw it. But yeah, we, other than Sundance, I think it was the most I'd ever paid for a movie ticket.
Okay. What
So
did
Yeah.
you pay
So
at
it's like it's
Sundance?
high volume plus high
15. It
price.
went from 10 up to 15, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
guess I just never
anyway,
thought of Sundance as an expensive ticket.
oh yeah, it is. I mean, but anyway, I back to Avatar. I don't know if
You don't
anyone
want
knows this.
Do you feel
We
uncomfortable
could
talking about Sundance, Mark? Is
no,
there something?
we
You're
should
one to
talk about
talk.
Sundance
I
sometime because
sense that there's something that
well, I'll talk about Sundance, but quickly. Did you know there are
no,
five Avatar movies?
no, there
Five.
aren't.
Yes.
That are
He's
planned.
been telling us that there's a half dozen sequels for like 10 years, and we're just barely going to see the first one this year.
No, the release dates are all released.
Oh, that
Yeah.
doesn't
December of
mean anything,
2024, 26, and 28.
right?
I I mean, if this movie
If they have the fourth one out in what 2026, is that what you said?
2026, yeah, is the fourth one.
That's the fourth one. If that comes out in 2026, I owe you a taco, brother.
Well, I think I'm going to be getting that taco because one third of Avatar 4 has already been filmed. Oh yeah.
Ooh. I think a lot of it has just been that technology catching
Oh
up a
wait, I have
bit.
an update.
Yeah.
John Landau said a third of Avatar 4 has already been filmed. But then it was announced at D23 Expo, which is I guess the annual Disney Expo on
Right.
September 9th, that Avatar 4 just began filming. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody put out some fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But
and I do want to say, Josh, I do think that these will be produced because Disney is kind of connected to it now, and they're definitely like sticklers about like let's get that production line going. So I think that's also helping things. Plus, they have their Avatar world, so
mhm.
they have a huge investment in a
So
lot of
you're saying they're
incentive
going to force
really.
it down our throats no matter what?
I think so,
Listen to this budget. All
unless
five
this one does
movies,
poorly.
1.23 billion with a B dollars for all five avatars.
Well, stretch
Five
across
avatars.
5 movies. I mean,
Oh, this is so dumb.
I bet Josh loves that we're
This is
just doing
so
an entire Avatar podcast right now. That's
no,
his
it's no.
favorite.
This is seriously like this has mystified me for a long time. Like, first of all, just the popularity of the movie itself, right? Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I get it. I mean, I could see this being like hundreds of millions of dollars and all the because everybody loved the 3D and stuff. Number one movie of all time for however many years it was. No, not even close. No way. Not even with inflation. But then there's like the whole, oh, I've got like half a dozen sequels planned, and he's seriously been saying this for like 10 years, and if he pulls it off, that's fine. Maybe I shouldn't doubt James Cameron, but I don't really have any interest in seeing this sequel, let alone another three or four. And you
You
know,
just, yeah,
we'll see. We'll see if they
JC.
can be more successful than the Fantastic Beasts franchise, because they
ooh.
had a lot of sequels planned too, as I recall.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think there've been a bunch of like would-be franchises that didn't quite get off the ground because like they didn't start out well. Like the one with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman about his Dark Materials. Do you remember that one?
No.
I think that was intended to be several movies because it's a lot of books, and I think they
Okay.
only ended up making one.
See, now that
Um,
that would be a fun podcast if we made
yeah.
Yeah.
if we came up with like a top 10 list of the funniest movies that I don't know, how do I describe this? Like bad movies that obviously weren't going to get sequels that still ended on some kind of a world building obvious
hmm
nod thinking that they were going to get a sequel,
Yeah.
right?
That
Well,
actually just might
Does
it's
that
make me
make
sad
sense?
because the ones that I think of are ones where I'm all like,
it's
I'll never have it.
it's called The Golden Compass, the one I was thinking about.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember
Oh,
that.
You
Daniel
remember
Craig was.
that? And it's a bunch of there's a
Oh,
bunch of books by Philip Pullman, um,
yeah.
and the movie came out, and I don't think it did quite as well as they wanted, and I think they only
Yeah.
just made the one movie.
Yeah.
And the
Well, and
other one I was
then
thinking about was
The
actually I'm
Mummy.
wrong on this, but I was thinking The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but they did end up making about three
They
movies of that one, didn't
yeah.
they?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I think the biggest or one of the bigger recent kind of flops was the because they were going to do a whole series of the monster movies from was it Universal? Because the Mummy from a couple of years
Oh,
ago with
the
Tom Cruise
DCEU, yeah, the
was
dark.
supposed to be part of, they
Mhm.
were going to do Wolfman and all that stuff too, and that just completely. But no, it seemed it. I swear, it seems like every third movie I see at least has something at the
True.
end that suggests, and this is just the start, and then the movie
hmm
just like tanks and oh, never mind, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
anyway,
I
I don't
remember
know.
hearing that too.
I need to talk about something positive because I feel like I'm
Okay.
I'm being very negative and cynical
Do you have
and
something
stuff.
positive to share with us?
Um,
Something you've been watching,
well, I mean,
maybe?
as I think about the stuff that we still want to talk about tonight, I think I can be comparatively positive. Certainly more positive than with
That Avatar.
with Avatar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, we have two series that have I think really just like launched in the last. I mean, because Andor was last week.
hmm
Last week with today being the 29th of September. And then Rings of Power. How long has Rings of Power been out now? Has that been a whole month or has it just been like 3 weeks?
Ooh, I
I
don't
feel like it's been a
know.
month almost. Or
Anyway,
Let me
I mean, they're
see. It
both
was
within the last month, right?
September
Yeah.
1st. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
4 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so which one do we want to talk about first between those two? What do you think?
Whichever one's gonna boost your mood.
Yeah, why don't you just whichever one you like better, why don't you just start with that? Because
Um,
you've seen them both, haven't you?
yeah. No, as of this recording, I've watched the first 4 episodes of Andor, and I've watched the first 3 episodes of Rings of Power. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Andor is more brand new, so maybe we should start with that one.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, just by way of background, this is the latest Disney Plus Star Wars series. What was the last one? I mean, the last one would have been Obi-Wan, right?
Yep.
hmm
Would have been Kenobi. So yeah, I mean, pretty high clip, I would say, because it wasn't that long before we did. Boba Fett was a little while ago. Now, when is the next Mandalorian season supposed to come out, or is there is
I
another
thought
one,
I
right?
thought it was supposed
Yeah,
to
I
be
think so.
this this year, but I could be wrong. Let me check.
Yeah, because anyway, I
Oh,
guess my point.
February. Yeah.
Okay, so not
Yep.
too long, but no,
Yep.
because they have been coming out at a pretty pretty regular pace, and Andor is I guess you'd have to say it's the prequel series to Rogue One. So Rogue One was the immediate prequel to A New Hope slash the original Star Wars,
Hmm.
and Andor is a multi-part series that is it tells the story of Cassian Andor was the not the he was not the protagonist of Rogue One, but he was kind of like the almost like the sidekick. I don't. You could almost argue maybe the love interest. There was some chemistry there, but anyway, so he was one of the rebels who stole the Death Star plans, and so this series is about how he joined the Rebel Alliance, and I mean that's really just kind of it's his origin story, and yeah, I mean so far so good. It takes I would say it took me about 3 episodes to kind of get into it.
Hmm.
The first couple of episodes were a little bit more on the slow paced side, not necessarily in a bad way. I I almost feel like I have to include this for context, just in case there's any unfair negativity or misinterpreted negativity. But so when you get a screener link to watch something early and you're watching it online, like as opposed to going to a theater and a press screening, a lot of times, in order to ensure that you don't pirate the the new content and put it around, they will like the Disney Plus or whoever it is will actually superimpose your own email address across the screen. And so like, it would be like trying to watch me with this, and of course it's varying places and sizes, and the size of my email address when I was trying to watch the pre-screen links for Andor was like, so you remember the size of the titles in Civil War from Marvel a couple years ago?
I don't.
You don't remember?
How big were they?
They were big. They were large. The Andor anti-piracy titles were not quite that big, but just as obnoxious. And so if you imagine like trying to watch an entire episode of a show through that, like even though it's kind of transparent, it's still like so
It's
distracting.
distracting.
In fact,
Yeah.
because I had access to the first 4 episodes before the first 3 were released, and I still didn't want to watch all 4 because it's like, you know what, nuts to this. I'm just going to wait till it comes out because I'm tired of trying to watch this show through my email address. Anyway, so I think partially for that reason, I wasn't able to appreciate the first couple of episodes as much because I was just really agitated by this.
Hmm.
But in terms of action and kind of momentum, the series it takes about until the 3rd episode before things really kind of get going. And it's even though the whole series is a prequel, it also has some elements, kind of like with Book of Boba Fett, where you're kind of toggling between 2 different timelines, where there's the just a few years before Rogue One, which is showing Andor's, you know, story about how he is joining the Rebel Alliance. But then it also flashes back to when he was a child and kind of how he first leaves his home planet, and he's really in kind of like more of a, I guess comparatively would be like a third world situation where the upbringing he had was did not have a lot of technology or anything, you know, certainly by Star Wars standards. And then he winds up getting picked up by, I'm trying to remember, like there's some like crashed Imperial ship on his planet, and some other proto rebels rescue him and take him off, and so he kind of lives this vagabond life that eventually, you know, as an adult, he gets kind of drafted from into the Rebel Alliance. And so I don't know. I mean, there's, you know, so there you're kind of following his story as he's kind of getting integrated into, you know, groups that are going to lead him to the alliance, and at the same time there's kind of this, it's almost like a the relationship I'm thinking is like a third party vendor in Amazon, where it's not necessarily the Empire, like the Imperial bad guys who are chasing him, but it's almost like a contractor that the Empire uses to manage some of the smaller systems. There's
Mm-hmm.
one particular guy who's trying to hunt Andor down, and so there's kind of a pursuer, kind of in the same way that oh, is it Third Sister was the character from
Mm-hmm.
Kenobi. So in the same way that she is going after Obi-Wan, this guy from like this third-party Amazon vendor version of I don't even know. It's almost like a rent-a-cop. You could almost say like there's this rent-a-cop guy and he's chasing after Andor, but then the Empire steps in and says, "You suck. You're you can't do this anymore. The Empire's taken over because you're blowing it." And so that's the first 4 episodes. But no, it is more fun than that. And like I say, the thing that I take away, I mean, there's a good production value, and it has more of kind of the look and feel of Rogue One, and that's one of the main reasons that I feel like, unlike Mandalorian, and to a lesser extent Boba Fett, and also unlike Kenobi, I think that in the same way that Rogue One was designed more for adults, I think that Andor, comparatively, compared to the other streaming series, is intended for adult fans. Not in terms of like inappropriate content, but just in terms of like it doesn't. They're not plugging in kid characters to kind of check the Disney boxes, and there's not really any like silly humor or anything. It's a little bit more sober, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more kind of slow character driven and stuff, in the same way that Rogue One was. And so, not that that necessarily makes it better or worse. I mean, I enjoyed it, as I have enjoyed it as a series so far. But that did stand out to me, is in terms of kind of a characteristic of it, is that, oh yeah, they want this to be different from the other Star Wars series. So
Yeah, I've read. I mean, I haven't seen it, so
I
I
was going to
can't
say,
comment
like,
on it.
so you haven't
But
seen it either? Okay.
I haven't seen any of them. But I did read that it is more of an adult, mature type Star Wars, and it
Right.
may, if it's successful and people respond to it, it may signal a little shift or a new direction.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I've read that the hero is not perfect. He's a complex hero. Like he does things that are probably some other Star Wars
Yeah.
heroes probably wouldn't do. And so I do plan to watch it. I'll
Hmm.
definitely check that one out.
No, and I mean, that, as I recall, was really one of the themes or ideas with Rogue One, was that,
Hmm.
we kind
Yeah.
of have this idea that the Rebel Alliance is all like Luke Skywalker, right? But, or, yeah, not really. I mean, I think one of the things that was fun about Rogue One was seeing that, okay, well, these people are really conflicted, and they're kind of torn from their happy backgrounds, and kind of forced into these conflicted situations, and so this series is very much an extension of that. And yeah, so I mean, it's not. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I would say that I like it better than The Mandalorian. I mean, I still think The Mandalorian is kind of the most fun of all the streaming series so far. But it's good, and if you want a little bit more of a, like, I say, more of a character driven, because they're really not bending over backwards to have lots of action sequences, and and
Hmm.
and no, like I said, they're not bringing in young Princess Leia or Baby Yoda or anything to, there's. I don't know that there's going to be a whole as much of a marketing push behind this series as there would behind, you know, uh, I'd say down at the Disney store, but the Disney store, at least in Salt Lake, doesn't exist anymore. So
Mm.
what are you going to do? You use that internet thing to order your Star Wars toys now.
Go on to,
Right.
onto the interwebs,
Yep.
work
Yep.
through Amazon,
Yeah.
and
Order
the
order
third
things.
party.
You'd have to order things the way 99% of the world does now, apparently. So,
Yeah, for
Forcing
yeah.
us to
reals.
get with the times. Who do they think they are? Apple? God.
Oh, goodness.
All right. Okay. So I don't know if there's much more to say about Andor. Maybe Mark, because I know that you started Rings of Power before I did, so
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
lest
I
I
can.
just keep talking for the whole episode, maybe you
Well,
should hear from the other people on the podcast.
yeah, let me give a little background. And what I'm going to try to do this, and you guys check me on this because
Sure.
when we were talking about it before, I realized like I don't think I want us just constantly compare it to the source. I'm going to say the source material, but the Lord of the Rings, whether we're talking about the books or the movies, I'm really going to try to judge it on its own merits as its own separate work, because it's so easy to do that. I think to just constantly reference something in relation to something else that it's sort of
Okay.
inspired by and based on and supposed to be consistent with.
Yeah.
So we have
I have
this
specific
thing.
thought on that. So
Okay,
I'm
well, it'll
glad. No,
be
I'm
good
glad
to
you're
hear
making it.
it.
No,
It'll be good.
we're gonna have a good discussion here.
Yeah, I think we will. And also, I kind of like to have a general like book versus movie discussion too. I always want people to try to judge those
All
things
right, we're going
separately as
for a
well.
2 hour
For
episode,
sure.
ladies
No,
and
three,
Oh
gentlemen.
my
three
gosh.
hours.
3 hours.
Anyway,
3 hours. Let's do it.
so
This
here's
will
the
be the
thing.
extended cut. We'll have all of our.
There we
We
go.
have this it's called The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and it just came out on Amazon. It's been filming for a long time. There are 8 episodes. 5 have been released starting this weekend when people are listening to this, but September 30th they're going to release an episode every Friday until they get to 8. And that'll be considered the first season of Rings of Power. And I have seen the first 5, so I've seen all the ones that are available. Really, it starts with Galadriel, who is the elf, also from the. Oh, I got to be careful. I didn't want to do that. Galadriel is a
It's
character in
okay.
another
You have to
work
give
of
it
art.
context.
Yeah, I have to, right? Yeah,
Well, I
and
mean,
I
I think
think we're
that's the
supposed
hard
to.
thing is that it is kind of connected because
Yeah,
it
it
says
is.
like a Lord of the Rings story with it,
It
doesn't it, or
is.
something like that. So
Yeah, I
like,
guess in terms of quality and stuff, I'm trying not to like do constant comparisons, but Galadriel is a character throughout Lord of the
yeah,
Rings, and she's immortal, she's an elf, and so it makes sense. And there's another elf named Elrond who she's friends with, but she narrates it just like she narrates at Lord of the Rings right from the beginning. And what it does is it's throughout what's called it's kind of the very beginning starts in what's called the first age where there's elves and men and other creatures who live, and then most of the series really takes place during the second age. It's still centuries before the third age, which is when the Lord of the Rings takes place. And there's a great the villain who is defeated near the beginning is named Morgoth, trying to pronounce it correctly. And he has a servant named Sauron. Sauron. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the one from Lord of the
Soran,
Rings.
wasn't it Soran?
Sauron, yeah, it's Sauron. And so what we do is we immediately start out with a bunch of stories of separate characters that they kind of go back and forth between their stories. So one of them is this. She's a very determined, ambitious, elfin fighter, played by Morfydd Clark, and that's Galadriel, and she wants to hunt down and find Sauron. And after centuries of basically with a band of other elf fighters, they don't really find much, although she believes that she finds evidence that Sauron is still out there. And so they return back to their kingdom, and they're basically said, "Hey, we've won. There's no evil. There's no ongoing war." And so what they do is they send people to, I think it's called Valinor, and it's where they can go out west and sail into this beautiful paradise and live forever. And she's
In
uneasy
retirement.
with it. Retirement, sort of elf retirement, right?
Yeah,
sure.
right.
And she's not happy with that. And that's kind of where we start. And it's interesting if I mean, I know there's an ensemble of characters, but if I were to pick one who is the primary character
Yeah,
of
she's a protagonist
Rings
for
of
sure.
Power,
Yeah,
she's the
Yeah.
one.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
her. And then you also have these creatures called the Harfoots, which are sort of like hobbits, but not quite. I assume that they were, but they're not. They're sort of a precursor race to hobbits. And interestingly, when and J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about Harfoots, they have a browner complexion than hobbits. So some of what we've sort of talked about in the past maybe appears to be a slightly more accurate than we thought. And so there's one who's an adventurous little Harfoot named Nori who really wants to get out and explore the world and doesn't want to just be always part of the tribe and wants to go out and do her own things. And so kind of presents her as sort of an ambitious spirit who's ready to try other things. And one of the things that happens in the first episode is this mysterious, tall, perhaps human-like stranger crashes into the Earth, almost like a meteor. And so part of what we're trying to learn throughout the series is, who is this person? There are some magical powers. He can barely speak English, or common, as Tolkien would say. And so that's kind of an interesting sort of subplot, is who is this stranger, and is he really there to help? And it's sort of an adventure for Nori. It's like something different, something new. And I think, I'm just going to do it. Nori's contrasted from Frodo, because Frodo doesn't, has to sort of be urged on by the goodness of his heart and his other people to go on this really dangerous quest. And Nori seems like the type that would do it the moment that she's, confronted with such a quest. And then there's Elrond, who I mentioned, is another elf. He visits a dwarf, Moria, which is where the dwarfs live. And one of the cool things I like about Moria is we see it before it's been completely destroyed and overrun by orcs and by evil, because we're seeing the Second Age. It's like this really cool intermountain, I don't mean intermountain, but inside of a mountain like kingdom. And
what's
I
their
was trying
healthcare
to make
like,
up
Mark?
a word, and I just
What's their level of
messed up.
healthcare? Are they
Yeah.
they got good insurance? Those dwarves.
So Durin, Durin and Elrond are friends, but it's kind of funny because for pretty much the first couple episodes, Durin is pretty angry with Elrond because he hasn't visited in 20 years, which for him is a huge deal. He's married, he's got kids, but for Elrond, who is an elf, it's like nothing. For like beings that can live for centuries and centuries, 20 years really isn't that long. And so you kind of discover more about their friendship and what was the real meaning of the visit, and was there an ulterior motive to the visit? And so, yeah. And then, anyway, I mean,
there's like three or four more.
There's a few other little subplots. I mean, I guess the other major one I should mention
There's
is
the other elf
between
guy.
Right, there's an
Yeah.
elf guy named Arondir and a human woman who's a human healer. That's her profession, her job, or her ability, and her name is Bronwyn. She has a son named Theo, who I guess I should pause to mention has the only traditional or classic name in the entire series, from what I can tell so far. Although Theo might be short for like Theodondria or something like that. I don't know.
That's true. That's true.
Theodir.
Yeah.
A lot of them end in R or L. I've noticed a lot of these token names either end in R or L. It just seems to be something he's interested in. But
Right.
It sounds pretty.
anyway, there's this little kind of subplot where like the elves are there to guard the humans, and the humans in this place called the Southlands aren't very happy about it. And Arondir and Bronwyn seem to have a connection, maybe a romantic connection, but because it's a human and an elf, it can't really work. Elf and human connections, the elf basically has to become mortal. And so it's a huge sacrifice if anything like that were to happen. Because elves are immortal, it doesn't really truly mean they're immortal. Like they can die in battle, for example. But if nothing like stops their life, they can live forever. Unlike humans, which will just naturally die of old age. And so anyway, there's a subplot there, and then orcs are discovered, and the humans of that area have to kind of figure out how to battle or avoid or join or whatever with the orcs. And so I don't know. It's kind of probably too long of an explanation, but there's so much more
It's like,
to it.
There's so many
yeah.
parts.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a lot going on.
Right, and I guess I'll say for Tolkien fans, and maybe this is where Danny may disagree, but I think for Tolkien fans, there's a lot of meat on the bones here. I mean, there's a lot here that I think have been faithful from everything I've read from Tolkien's writings to the types of stories. Now, characters are made up. I mean, characters that Tolkien didn't write are made up and written into the series.
Yeah.
And of course, plots, things that happen aren't part of it. But there was a Second Age. A lot of these characters are from Tolkien, such as Galadriel and Elrond, And then the races are there. I mean, the Harfoots, even though they're not Lord of the Rings, Tolkien wrote about them.
Yeah.
And
so Mark, I just want to say real quick.
Go ahead.
Because you said we're not supposed to we don't want to be
Well,
referencing the books or anything. So
No,
I
he
am
said that
curious.
about
I,
him.
No, no, no,
I
no.
just
So
made
He
up an
said that for
arbitrary
him.
rule. I just made an arbitrary rule. It's
Danny,
meaningless.
you
You
let
can do
it
whatever
fly.
you
No, no,
want.
no, no, no. So I'm just saying this because I
Okay.
do want to know on its own merits.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because like I'm hearing a lot of justification where it's like, oh,
On
it's
its
tied to
own
this,
merits, I
and
like
I know
it.
it's because like I'm a
Well,
fan, right?
well, you
But
know what's
I do want to
interesting?
know on its own merits what you think.
Here's why I like it. Because I was thinking, I'm going way back to 1999 and thinking about when the Phantom Menace came out, which is
Hmm.
the first, episode one, and it was a huge deal. It was 16 years after Return of the Jedi, and most people kind of found things to criticize in it, such as
Hmm.
Jar Jar Binks or whatever. Well, I read Roger Ebert's review, and he gave it an absolutely glowing review. He called it like a visually stunning spectacle, and he made an interesting comment that said like this would be praised as a masterpiece, and he might not have used the M word, but as like a really, really good movie if we didn't have Star Wars, right? If we
Yeah,
didn't
no,
have any of
I
those
love the
original
Phantom
three
Menace. I
movies,
think it's
people would be
great.
like,
Yeah,
"Wow, this is the movie of the year."
yeah,
And I kind of wonder if we didn't have Lord of the Rings. I'm talking about anything, intellectual property, books, movies.
yeah.
This may be considered like, oh yeah, a must-see TV. Whereas I think a lot of people, especially the stans of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings groupies. I don't know, that makes no sense, but you know what I mean. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like those people are finding ways to nitpick and criticize and have problems with it, where I really don't. I mean, I definitely know that there's certain things that I can see when I see them on screen. I'm like, okay, there's a corporate reason why that's in there. Like that was a bunch of people in a room saying we got to make sure that's in there. I've seen some of that, but to
Hmm.
me, it doesn't overshadow or ruin the experience of it.
Yeah. So the
Um,
great experience stories that you're
yeah,
invested
I
in,
I'm
characters you're
into
invested
it.
in. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I'm into it. I mean, I don't think it's great, but it's good. It's good, and there's certain things about it that I think are great. And I've mentioned this before. I think like the settings. There's a human
Mm.
kingdom, an island kingdom that was given from the elves, sort of brought up out of the sea by the elves, which I don't understand, but given to men, called Numenor, and a lot of it takes place there. I mean, basically from episode three or maybe the end of episode two on, there's a lot that happens at Numenor, a lot of palace intrigue, and many new characters are introduced throughout those third and fourth episodes. But it's a really cool looking place, and yeah, so I recommend it. I've enjoyed it, and then one nice thing about it too is, and because some people I see comparing it to not Game of Thrones, but
House of the Dragon.
House of the
Hmm.
Dragon.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's like TV 14. I mean, it's fine for kids even. Like maybe not
Yeah.
really little kids, but like there's some, I guess, some violent
I was gonna say
orc violence
some of
that's
the violence I saw in the
scary.
fourth episode today
Yeah.
or no, maybe the third episode, whatever the last one I saw was when the orcs are going after when the elves try to get away
Hmm.
and the orcs go
Yeah,
after them.
there's some
The no,
I
it's the
guess
warg,
I would
the
call
warg.
PG-13 type violence, but nothing that's
Okay.
R
Yeah,
It
level.
nothing
surprised
that's
me.
too
Yeah,
gross.
and orcs. It's
Good.
interesting. Lord of the Rings has some pretty violent orc stuff, but then when they
Yeah, no,
bleed, they don't even
absolutely.
bleed red blood. I'm like, gosh,
Yeah.
I haven't let my kids watch it yet because I don't want to give them like orc nightmares, but
Well, so you want to know what's funny
pretty
on that
soon.
note?
Yeah.
So when they did the extended edition of Battle of the Five Armies, it actually got an R rating.
Oh,
Have you seen the extended?
no.
But it's like this crazy CGI violence where like it's just kind of more beheadings and disembowelings
Yeah,
and stuff. And it's kind of so cartoonish that it's kind of funny to think this is what got
an R rating.
like a Tolkien movie an R rating.
That
Okay.
is
Well,
funny.
that was yeah, all right.
Hmm.
So
Go ahead.
can I
Do it.
report
Yeah.
on Rings of Power now?
Yeah.
So to start on a positive note, it is better than I feared after I saw the trailer several months ago. Because when I saw that
Mm.
trailer, because I'd been kind of excited, I thought, oh well, cool. I'd be up for a series from Tolkien, Lord of the Rings ish type stuff, and then I saw that trailer and just thought, ooh, this looks a little weird. I'm not really sure about this, and so I've been very apprehensive about checking it out. And then of course I read some of the kind of the negative feedback and stuff, a lot of which seemed to be kind of like I said, Mark, about uh, talking about you know Tolkien's source material and being faithful to this or that. Now, because I think that don't they say that they it's taken from the appendices, not necessarily because this is the Silmarillion, right? Yeah. So anyway, no, so I definitely have enjoyed it more than I feared. I still have pretty mixed feelings about it,
Yeah.
for a lot of the reasons that, like, I totally understand the idea of wanting to kind of measure it on its own merits and try to allow it to stand alone, but I just don't think you can do that because the whole reason for this thing's existence is that it is based on and building on, because I guess the most concise way that I would say it is that if I wasn't already a fan of the Lord of the Rings books and films, and if they didn't have the connections in this series, I wouldn't be interested in this series. I wouldn't keep watching it. The characters and storylines that I've seen, they have their good moments. There's some that I like more than others, but I don't know that there's enough on its own that would make me like I am most interested to see how this connects up with what I know is to come. Right? When I hear about certain character names that maybe I won't spoil them here. And so I think, okay, so this is eventually, so in my head, I'm thinking, all right, well, so I guess the series is going to be leading to this particular thing that we know is going to be a precursor to what happens in the Peter Jackson movies, right?
Yeah.
And so, and this, I think it's actually really appropriate that we talk about this the same episode as Andor, because it's kind of a similar type of deal where, I remember that one of the, because I liked Rogue One quite a bit, but one of the most interesting criticisms I heard of it was that it was just so dependent on New Hope and Star Wars in general that it didn't stand very well because it'd be completely indecipherable to somebody who had never seen those other movies. Now, granted, nobody who goes to see Rogue One will have never seen any other, like nobody's going to see that as their first Star Wars movie, right? So it's not a big deal. But I kind of thought, well, if it wasn't for the connections to these other things, would these things be okay on their own? And I don't know. Like, as I look at the different storylines, I'm not invested yet. I'm not really blown away by the characters, and it's definitely watchable. And there's some great production quality. The thing, in fact, I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most was, Mark, something that you already pointed out, which is that it was really, really cool to see. Was it Barad-dûr or where? No, you said it was Moria, right? So in Lord of the Rings, we see the aftermath of this great dwarf kingdom inside of a mountain.
Yeah.
But we don't see what it actually looked like when they were living there.
Right.
And this is really cool. Like what they've done to show like what this was actually supposed to be as a living, working community is awesome. Like I love that. But again, that's dependent on it being connected to something that I already kind of have a background with and can kind of, connect these narrative dots with. And I don't know. I also kind of get the sense, and, I'm sure that this is intentional, but it kind of feels like they're repeating a lot of the same motifs as Lord of the Rings, where it's like, okay, let's have a romance between an elf and a human, because it's not going to work. And so there's going to be tension about, are they going to give up immortality, right?
Right.
And let's have another relationship between a dwarf and an elf, right? Because
a little rivalry slash relationship.
Yeah. And even
and an exiled king, a potential human king in exile. When that happened, I kind of saw that coming before it even was revealed. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like Aragorn, but not,
Yeah.
So
because I definitely think that good storytelling includes echoes of other stories and things. But there's a difference between an echo and a soft reboot. And it feels like there's too much going on here where they're just kind of repeating the same things for the sake of, I don't know if it's a lack of originality. I don't know.
I don't know.
Which is not to say that I do like lots of things about it. There's definitely more positive than I expected. I'm really frustrated with Galadriel's character, honestly. Like, she's just not very likable, and I assume that is because there's supposed to be a character arc between the Galadriel that we see here versus the one that we're gonna get to know. But like, she's just so dramatically different than Kate Blanchett
Right. She's overly ambitious. She has something in her that she just has to
Well,
fight. She
and
wants
just
to
to the
fight
point
no
where you just
matter
want to say,
what.
"Hey, just chill out.
Just chill
Will
out.
you
Yeah.
just sit down and take a breath? Stop
There's
being such a punk.
one thing you see in
You're
this show.
already at 2,000 years old."
This is why I was talking about sort of like corporate decision making at the writing level. I think in this is there are about probably four of the five most important characters are strong warrior-like female characters in this. And you go back to like Fellowship of the Rings, and it's like, what was it, nine dudes just walking through the mountains. You know what I mean? And they meet Galadriel, and they meet the other I can't remember the one that was Liv Tyler the elf, but like it's mainly guys, and so I think there was a very like a deliberate, intentional decision to have female characters kind of at the forefront of this. So yeah, and of course, I mean, Galadriel's the best fighter around and can beat all the guys, and so you see that. But I mean, I didn't really have a problem with it. Yeah, I don't love her
Well, I don't have
character.
a
She's not
I
my
don't have a
favorite
problem
character,
with her being a
but
female character at all. It's more
yeah,
just kind of that she's just not very likable.
The attitude,
yeah,
kind of.
It's
maybe a
Maybe
little
turn
bit of the
off.
attitude. Yeah. Um,
I
What one thing that I would like to see, because I think you're mentioning it, like, okay, you want to see how it connects, and it's kind of like when you're watching, say, Better Call Saul, and you see somebody that's like, oh, that dude's in Breaking Bad, that's so cool.
yeah.
Like, it actually is kind of cool. Like when you, oh, okay, yeah, that's where it started, where he started. But like with this one, I actually really want something unpredictable. For example,
Yeah.
since there's so many characters that are new, I think it would be kind of cool. Not that I'm like rooting for death, but if they actually killed, if they had a shocking death where it was like they kill off a character that's unexpected and it kind of is, it makes you sad and it's like, oh wow, that was, I did not see that coming. Because there's certain characters we know they're just not going to kill off since
Right,
they're in
Yeah.
Lord of the
right.
Rings, right? There's a lot of new ones that I think it could create a pretty emotional, story arc for that character and for the people who know that character. Like, let's say they just, episode 6 or episode 7 do something. And you even go back to Fellowship of the Rings when you thought Gandalf was killed, but wasn't. But I mean, it was pretty sad, like, oh, he's gone. Like, that was weird, and
Was that your
when
reaction
he was
in the
fighting
theater?
Balrog. Well, I wasn't like, oh, that was weird. I mean, I was sad. I was like,
You just fell into that chasm. That was kind of weird.
fly, you fools. Yeah.
We need to
Well,
go
oh,
see more
that's
movies together.
yeah. Anyway,
Well,
Sorry.
maybe you'll get that, Mark, because like a lot of the talk before more of the promotional stuff came out was that like this was supposed to be like Amazon's Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Like not necessarily maturity
that's
wise,
Right.
but in
right.
that popularity and
They
that
wanted it
epic.
popular, big
Yeah.
budget. They
A
want to
big
bring a
So
fantasy
you
lot of
might
people
get a
to
franchise. Yeah.
Prime.
surprising death then,
There might be. I mean, I would
Yeah.
I think that could happen, but
Yeah.
to me, it's not just a little story like you were talking about where they do the soft reboot, kind of like Force Awakens, where maybe
Oh
there's good
yeah.
fan service
Yeah.
No,
and
and
bad
I
fan
No,
I had
service.
exactly.
to I had to admit that to myself too. I mean, I really loved
Yeah.
Force Awakens. I liked a lot of things about it, but then I
Oh
just
yeah.
really just kind of had to begrudgingly admit that was totally a reboot
Oh,
in
it was
in
in
almost
so
every,
many ways,
and
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 this is
and this one
too.
is not that bad. I mean, by comparison, this isn't even close to the same thing. It's just that
Hmm.
there are so many very deliberate, you know, echo choice like relationships that
Yeah.
are and so it just kind of makes me think, well,
Yeah.
okay, so what are you going to do differently here? Because I thought that part of what was cool about Gimli and Legolas was that they were kind of breaking ground and they were bringing these cultures together after centuries of tension and stuff. And so again, kind of, and we've kind of talked about this before, I think, where by doing it, however, like 2,000 years or whatever it is previous, it almost kind of undercuts what's to come because all right, well, I guess in the
A
timeline
lot
of
could happen. Yeah, a lot could
yeah,
happen in that
and
period of
I don't
time.
know, I get it, I know what they're doing, I see what they're doing, I understand the context of it, but it kind of I don't know. I guess right now there is just not enough that I really like to not
Hmm.
be annoyed by the things that are kind of frustrating. Like I feel kind of half and half on Rings of
Yeah.
Power right now. Where like I said, it's definitely better than I thought it was going to be.
Do you
For sure.
do you
Go
think
ahead.
you're going to keep watching it?
I don't know.
Are you?
That's the question,
Yeah.
honestly. is
Yeah.
that, so if this helps, I mean, there are series like, Stranger Things and stuff where as soon as you're done with an episode, you're kind of dreading the end of the episode because you think, oh, it's almost going to end, and then you're just okay, got to go for another one. I just want to go. Even when I'm rewatching seasons of shows like Stranger Things, I still want to just keep going to the next episode.
Oh, I feel ya. Yeah.
Rings of Power, I don't feel
You
that.
don't feel that way?
Yeah,
You're like, okay, good, I got it. It's done. I just
well,
finished
no,
that. I
no,
can do
no, it's
something
not.
else.
Like I said, it's not. It's kind of like right there in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm not just sitting there thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is garbage. This is so bad." Not at all. I mean, the production value is good. The performances are good. There are lots of individual things that I like, but it did occur to me while I was watching the episode I was watching today, where I just thought, man, if it wasn't for those tie-ins to, Lord of the Rings, I don't think I would be. I mean, part of it is just I'm not a huge fantasy fan. Lord of the Rings is kind of the exception for me in that
Yeah, I
regard.
feel that.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I
I think I'd be willing to give it a couple more episodes for sure, just to kind of, I, I would be the last one who would argue that a show has to be awesome from the first episode in order to justify its existence. I mean, we kind of need to give them time to grow. One
yeah.
of the, funny enough, one of the only exceptions that I would get there, if this will make sense. I've been rewatching the first season of X-Files, and man, like that show was just good from the beginning. Like right from the beginning was just really, really fantastic. But so not everybody has to have time to grow necessarily, but
Yeah.
I'll give Lord of the Ring or Rings of Power.
Rings of Power.
Lord of the Rings of Power.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings of Power, How I Met Your Mother, whatever. Well, do we have any idea how many seasons they want to do?
Oh,
Quite a few, I
I
think.
think I was reading they're already filming the second one, I think.
Okay.
I need to check.
And I
But
think
yeah,
I think
believe,
this is just something that kind of comes with the territory with anything that's a prequel, and maybe because I only saw the first couple episodes of Better Call Saul, and
Yeah.
so because as I understand it, that's one of the more successful prequel series slash movies, right? And I totally sympathize with this, but I think, man, it is so hard to do a prequel series well because, like you say, when the audience goes in knowing what's going to happen to all the characters, I mean, first of all, there's only a certain amount of tension when they're in mortal danger because it's not really mortal danger.
right.
But then also, trying to write something knowing what the end has to be, you run the risk of forcing the round peg into the square hole, right? Because I
Yeah.
think, I think that letting something happen more organically and naturally, sometimes the stories, I would want to say that I was reading Stephen King's On Writing. I'm going to give credit here. I'm not sure this is him saying it, but he almost kind of talks about how the stories will write themselves, right? You kind of start with characters and premise and stuff, and it's not like, well, I know what A and B and Z is, and I'm going to push it towards Z no matter what. So like I say, I really respect the challenge of doing something that kind of has kind of a prequel nature to it. But
Yeah.
part of the reason I respect it is because it so often doesn't work out very well.
Yeah.
But so we'll see.
I know. I
Sorry,
think
Mark.
when
You're
Breaking
you're
Bad-
carrying the torch for Rings of
Oh,
Power
it's
now,
okay.
and so
Yeah, when Breaking Bad came out, I actually, not Breaking Bad, when Better Call Saul came out, I thought it was going to be just a bomb. Like, it was
Really?
not going to be good. I was like, they're going to do a whole series about that lawyer, and if it's a prequel, it's kind of the same problem I had. Like, I just didn't think it could carry a show, and boy, was I wrong. Like, I love it as much as
yeah,
Breaking Bad.
really.
Yeah.
And they were able to weave in so many interesting other characters, and a lot of the ones that we know, and I just think they did such an awesome job with that. With this one,
And
I've tried to. Oh, go ahead.
no, sorry. Just before you move on from Better Call Saul, I was just going to say, like, my reason for not watching it is not that I didn't like the first two episodes or whatever. It's more just kind of the feeling like watching Breaking Bad. like Breaking Bad was probably one of the best shows I've ever watched, but it was also just like one of the most like spiritually draining, just like leaving me thinking the world is an awful place and there are scary people out there and I don't need to be reminded of how terrible the world is. And so
Yeah.
I just kind of thought,
Yeah.
oh man, if Better Call Saul is gonna be the same thing, I just don't know that
If you
I'm
could
up
do it
for
again.
it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not.
Because I have
kinda
no
wondered
doubt that
too.
it's a fantastic show. I mean, they
Yeah.
did such a great job with Breaking Bad. I'm sure it's the
Breaking Bad is much more violent, first of all,
is it?
and yeah. I mean, there are not very many deaths in Better Call Saul, and if you think about it, I mean, when you look at what it's about, it does kind of make sense, like it does get more violent as it goes, but I mean, Breaking Bad, I feel like was violent from the
Oh yeah.
episode
No, and
one,
that's what I mean.
you
Is
know.
that watching Breaking Bad after a certain point, there was at least one moment with every episode where I had to ask myself, do I want to keep watching this show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is really, I mean, the characters, the acting, the writing is all fantastic, but oh man, just like there was always just kind of one moment where something would happen. You'd just think, oh man, this
Well,
is
so
too much.
going back to
Too much.
ROP, now that it's known by an acronym.
Oh, is that what?
everyone
Is that what you just
They
pulled?
call it ROP. The cool
ROP?
kids are calling it ropping around.
Yeah, all the
when you're
kids
watching
walking
this
around
episode.
calling it ROP. They're like, "Yo, you see the latest
All
ROP?"
the Hepcats.
Yeah. So I like some of the themes that it explores. Like, for example, and this is even Fellowship of the Rings, right? Like uneasy alliances that have to be forged in order to defeat evil. I mean, sometimes is it worth it if it's like you have to be with your enemy to team up to defeat evil? And then there's another one about like if you make a promise to a friend, like a loyal, like your oldest friend, and then find out that maybe you have to break that promise because your king or your higher up tells you it's necessary to save the kingdom. There's some difficult kind of ethical dilemmas there, and I don't know if you've even gotten there yet. And then the
That
other
doesn't
one
sound
that's kind of
familiar.
from the beginning is like, when someone is convinced that there's an evil lurking out there, but maybe the evil is lying dormant, how much energy and time and resources do you spend like chasing after it versus sort of just trying to lie it, be prepared, wait, and that goes on in this too. Like, is it good to go out and just affirm, like proactively, aggressively look for the evil, or sort of lay back and maybe make preparations, but don't really hunt it down because maybe there's a chance it's not really going to bother you. Like you stir it up, and that's going on. I mean, that's really kind of what the whole deal is with the main character.
Well,
Of
and she's
Galadriel.
also, I mean, her big motivation, as I take it, is that she wants to avenge her brother because
Yeah.
Sauron killed her brother, right? Again, which
Right,
is totally,
right.
justifiable. It just seems like, I don't know, because like I said, I understand the idea that they want to give Galadriel a character arc, and so the idea of her being the wizened sage, that she is in Fellowship of the Ring wouldn't totally make sense. But I don't
Yeah.
know. It just seems like
Yeah, it kind of makes you
the foot's
think.
a little heavy on the gas pedal, and
Yeah.
I think that it might be better to kind of
Tone it down. It
yeah.
kind of makes you think she's going to suffer maybe an even greater loss or something where it's going to have to really create a shift in her personality eventually to get to be more the Galadriel we know from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a decision she has to make at some point. And so, yeah, because she's just a hard-headed, know-it-all kind of, like leader in a lot of ways, but yeah. So
And just
there you
and
go.
also to throw that in, I also noted and thought it was pretty cool. I guess the stuff I like best is with the dwarves, even though no, because I also thought that was kind of a cool kind of recognition observation when we discover that the reason that it wasn't Balin. What's the name of the dwarf king?
Oh,
Who's
Durin?
Elrond's Durin?
Oh,
Yeah,
no. No,
yeah. I think it's Durin.
Durin is the friend of Elrond. His father's the king, but yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, the friend of
yeah,
Elrond,
yeah.
but the concept of 20 years to a dwarf versus 20 years to an elf, I thought that was pretty cool because I thought,
Yeah,
yeah, no,
I did too.
it makes sense that if you just kind of check out
Right.
for 2 decades, to an elf, it's
Yeah.
like 6 months, you
Yeah.
know.
The
or
I think the one storyline I haven't gotten into that much yet is the Harfoots, and I really think they
yeah,
put that in there because hobbits are at the center of Lord of the Rings, and of course the
yeah.
Hobbit, and
Oh,
it's so far. If I mean, you could almost, depending on what the mysterious stranger is, that's one you could almost cut out or even put a little bit even more on the back burner because there's just not much involved to the central story with what the Harfoots are going through. Although there's theories about who the mysterious stranger is, but they kind of say, well,
I
could it
mean,
really be a
it's
human
gotta
because he
be kind
crashed
of
into the Earth and
obvious,
he
right?
lived? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I guess they could surprise me, but
I kind of hope they do surprise us, right? Like you don't. Like I said, I don't want it to be too predictable. The one type of character they haven't done yet as sort of a similar type character is a golem. I feel like.
yeah.
Although maybe it'll
well, we
happen
don't
because
have
Gollum
the
used to be a
ring.
hobbit, a normal hobbit. What?
Well, no, he was one of the river people, right?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
Smeagol. He was a river.
But he wasn't. I mean, those weren't hobbits though.
Oh, I was wrong. Okay, he was.
Yeah.
Was he just a human?
Well, not. But
No.
they're like a different. They're like halflings, but they're not hobbits.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. A halfling. See, I don't even. I'm not up on my Lord of the Rings, so there you go.
Your
Sorry.
lore of the rings.
My lore of Lord of the Rings.
Could you
Yes.
please?
Anyways, fair enough.
If you join our Patreon group, we'll have our special class.
Go into the lore.
We'll be able to talk about the lore of the rings, and yeah, and I'll complain about more stuff. You'll be able to get twice as much complaining for your dollar.
Oh goodness.
No,
Okay.
gosh, that was. And see the movie I saw tonight. Oh man,
Oh,
We'll talk about
we'll have
next.
to hear about that next week, huh?
yeah, yeah, because I did. So well, I don't know. Yeah, it's an hour and 12, or at least
Well, you could
before
probably say
before
you've
Daddy.
seen it. People do that. You just aren't allowed to
I
give
know.
your opinion on it,
No,
right?
and I
Like,
and I
yeah.
should, yeah. So I'm not even gonna do that. I'm just gonna say that I saw a movie tonight
Okay.
before this recording. That unfortunately, by the time you are listening to this episode, the embargo will not have lifted, and so I cannot say what the movie is or anything about it. But our next episode will definitely cover it.
Mm.
That's a
So
good hook.
there you go. Get excited,
Hey.
people.
Make sure you
What
subscribe
else is
so you'll
coming
be
on?
here when.
Yeah. What else is happening, people? What can we leave off with? Final thoughts, statements, announcements,
I have
pitches,
announcements,
promotions. Please, Danny, what you got?
and this has been really, really hard. But I've been thinking about it a lot, just honestly for the last couple of months. And it was just like super back and forth. But then the last couple of days, I felt a little more sure of it. But I'm thinking this is my last film pod episode, and I'm thinking I might be leaving Utah
Oh
Film.
no.
So like, it was just I don't know. I've been so back and forth, and like I know this for a while, where it's like I probably wouldn't make a great professional critic, although I've learned so much from doing this. And Josh, you've been just the most amazing mentor, and I've loved working on this so much. But it's like I know my list of what I'll see is like so short, and so this year it's been like super tough, and like I was thinking like during the summer, I'm like, why am I doing this? And then like Maverick came along, and like Marcel and Mr. Malcolm's List. I'm like, oh, these things. But then it's like those things are so few and far between. And then there's just like a lot of stuff going on, personal life too. And I don't know. I've just been feeling really inspired since I watched that Stallone interview, and he talked about how he didn't like what he was seeing in the industry, and it's not a big surprise that I'm pretty disgruntled with the things that are coming out right now. And I've just been feeling a lot lately like I want to be trying to go for producing again. I started doing this because I was like super afraid, where I'm like, what am I doing with a film degree if like being on set is like making me really nervous and stuff? And I thought maybe I should be a critic, right? But like, I don't know, just lately I've been feeling very inspired. I have this screenplay in the works that I'm feeling really excited about. I'm gonna be. I've been filming a lot this week, but that's mostly for school stuff. I have a more official gig coming up in 2 weeks to be a production assistant, and so, I'm just kind of wanting to explore that route a little more.
So do I have to lobby to have you stay on the air, or do I need to? Do I have to make my pitch publicly? No, I mean, I get it. I'm really sad to hear that, and I hope that you'll still give it some more thought, because I think there are a lot of reasons that we would be better off with you here. For one thing, we don't have to keep talking about new movies, because I don't like a lot of the new movies either.
Which has been something
I think
really
we have
nice.
more fun
Yeah.
when we talk about old stuff anyway. But
Yeah.
so maybe don't. Maybe it's kind of like the guys in Grand Tour, how like they stopped doing one version of the show but started doing other stuff instead that was still broadcast, because we still need you, Danny. And so
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I've said a lot of my piece. I'm afraid I've become a little bit of a broken record, but no, it's true. I love the discussions we'll have and everything. So
yeah,
I don't
I don't want to give that up. I definitely don't. But like I do want to validate the points that you make, though, which is that it's kind of, I mean, the questions that you were asking yourself are questions that I have been asking myself for 10 plus years, just because I definitely, I'm not going to go see everything that's out there. There's a lot of movies that I have specifically chosen not to review and not to go see. And it compromises you. It definitely puts you in a position where, okay, well, so how am I supposed to kind of do this job? I mean, we mentioned Sundance earlier, right? And it seems like the first few times I went to Sundance, I found myself sitting in movies thinking, okay, if I'm going to have to be seeing this stuff all the time to do my job, I don't know that I can do this.
yeah.
So you are not alone. You're still needed, and so one way or the other, I am not going to let you just ride off into the sunset completely without a fight. So
maybe what we'll have to do is pick a few of Danny's favorite movies and be like, we're
I mean,
talking about
do we
this
just
this
have to
week
do
on
lots of
Tuesday.
episodes on 90s movies? Is that what's it
Yeah, like
Because
classic.
I'm ready.
I would too. I love talking about. I guess the problem is I don't know how much like viewers and listeners love it, but I love talking about classic movies and older
Oh
movies.
my
Like,
goodness, yeah.
I mean, I think it's fun to pick even all-time greats. Like I was thinking, gosh, the AFI list, the American Film Institute top films of all time list. It'd be fun to go through some of those. Be like, okay,
Yeah.
why is this a classic, or do we hold it in that high esteem? As AFI does. But yeah, I mean, that would be really fun.
No,
No, it's good stuff. And I feel like I've gained so much respect though for the role of a critic, and I mean, it feels kind of like full circle for me, because I think our very first episode we Josh, you and I talked about what is the role of a critic.
Yeah.
And just I've really been able to see that, where it's such a valuable resource to know what is worth my time. And so a lot of the experiences I've had the last couple months was seeing what other people are saying, and it's like, that's not worth my time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just being the one to venture and being that source is, it's just, I know I want to give the listeners of this podcast that quality content to help them, and I don't know if I can do it really well, at least not right now. So
Oh, sure.
that's
Yeah.
kind of,
No, we totally understand, and
Yeah.
we will deal with whatever you decide to do, but
You'll deal with
we
it.
just don't want you to, we want you to understand that we want you.
Yeah.
oh, I know. You guys are amazing, seriously.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that ambiguous open-ended note, hopefully.
Sadly
It's the cliffhanger
ambiguous.
to go to the next episode
Hopeless.
immediately.
So, but thank you for taking the time to listen. Thanks to Danny for all she has done so far, and hopefully we'll still continue to
Definitely.
do, at least in some level. And thanks to Mark, and thanks to everybody. And so wherever you're at, well, now you have an extra incentive. Maybe drop us a message. Don't just suggest what you want us to talk about, but tell Danny why she needs to stay with the Utah Film Pod, and drop us a positive rating, a thumbs up, a 5 stars, whatever the internet wants you to do. And
Oh, we must obey the internet, of course.
that's right. That's the only consistent. We know that for sure. Okay, till next time, kids.